Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
On the chart for Sunday, it looks like, there we go, start again, there. Satellite imagery, several bands of moisture and rain and showers coming up along the North Gulf Coast, pulling back to the west with the main low center down in this area here in the Gulf of Alaska. So the main area of formation, Genesis down here, and then they come northward, pretty strong jet pushing them off to the east, and then it slows down as they approach the coast and begin to pull back to the west. Gale force winds over the southern southeast coast today, especially along the coastline there with rain and that mostly small craft advisories with less rain here along the North Gulf Coast. And that's sliding into Kodiak Island, but you can see a break coming in late this afternoon across southern Alaska. This band up through here weakening as it moved into the north there. Just some light snow reported over toward Northway and Tok. Kind of a windy day through the passes of the eastern Alaska Range with gusts of about 40 miles an hour at Delta from the east and southeast, and generally mostly cloudy or variably cloudy with a few flurries here over the interior, and some rainfall from St. Paul down across the eastern Aleutians. Actually mixed rain and snow this afternoon in Alaska with rain over to about False Point. St. Paul picked about 9/100ths of an inch. The report from Unalaska was missing. They probably had a heavier amount than that, and rainfall ranged from about 1/3 of an inch at Kodiak Island to about 1/2 an inch at Annette, and those are the heavier amounts reported. And you can see this band kind of stuck there over the eastern Aleutians, especially Unalaska, and the flow coming back around. Northerly winds out there gusting 20 to 35 miles an hour. That extends all the way back up to St. Lawrence Island and through the Bering Strait, and this north wind will continue through the weekend and gradually pull colder air southward in across the eastern Bering Sea, eventually on down to the Aleutians as higher pressure back here to the west begins to push eastward, and have another couple of systems coming up the southeast coast in the meantime tonight, tomorrow, and gale warnings are out for the entire southeast coast through tomorrow, and also at times here along the North Gulf Coast. You can see the next system right there curving up to the northeast. That's going to bring the gales back in later tonight as it comes on up to the north there. But up along the Arctic coast, not a lot going on, kind of some clouds up in this area, but just flurries, patchy fog reported along the area there. Barrow did pick up about 1/100th of an inch water equivalent of snow, so there was a little bit of moisture up there, but that mostly falls as ice crystals this time of the year. On the chart today, you can see the first front here breaking up and dissipating as it moves in over the interior. Again, a little more gradient over through here, kicking those winds up over the eastern Alaska Range, with some light snow getting into mostly the eastern area here, but some of that flurry condition back to the west, but nothing significant at all. Rain and snow eastern Aleutians, moisture pushing up toward the Pribilofs, and the rain here along the North Gulf Coast on down toward the Panhandle. Several lows rotating around the main center there over the western Gulf of Alaska. And tonight you'll see the next system, again back to the gale force winds, gusts 50 to 60 miles an hour as that moves in, and moderate amounts of rain, possibly heavy at times. Otherwise, to the North Gulf Coast, forecast is rain, periods of, mostly along the coast, not much getting inland here. Still some leftover moisture in the form of flurries. There are some brief periods of light snow over the Wrangell Mountains on up again into the eastern, or the eastern Alaska Range, about where they were today there, and some of that may slip on down, possibly getting into the Talkeetnas, but that's about it. Otherwise, partly to mostly cloudy through the interior. North slope, chance of some flurries, a little more cloudiness up there, and some patchy fog at times. Bering Strait stays windy, and colder air beginning to build over the northern Bering Sea, and this system weakening and starting to slide off to the southeast. And a very weak low here southwest of Kodiak Island. All the moisture coming back to the west will be following that frontal boundary down to the southwest here, spilling into the eastern Aleutians. So it's going to stay wet over Kodiak and a little bit on the breezy side as well. For the outlook for tomorrow, a little less wind here. You can see a few less lines on the map with periods of rain and fog. Not all that heavy, and again, mostly restricted to the coastal areas with nothing getting too far up to the north. Could have some rain slip on back into western Prince William Sound tomorrow afternoon. And then this front, or the low center, is now making a move back to the northwest, and so that's slowing the progression of the front down a little bit there. So the gale force winds, periods of rain will continue throughout the entire day tomorrow. Northeast winds a little drier, a few less clouds here over the southwest interior. Possibly even Bristol Bay be kind of right on the edge there, with most of the rain and snow staying to the east or south of the peninsula and the Aleutian Range. And quite a bit of moisture out here over the Bering Sea, with mixed rain and snow for the Pribilofs, and mostly rain from Atka on over to False Pass and Cold Bay. And some gusty winds up along the Arctic coast, especially on the west side here through the Chukchi Sea, down across the strait and into the Bering there, with mostly snow showers we'll see on Sunday. Pretty good surge of cold air coming southward, so that should drop the snow levels down to sea level for the Pribilofs here, mostly in the form of snow and even cooling off a little bit, but not all that terribly cold for this time of the year anyway. For the Aleutians, just some scattered rain and snow showers back to the northwest there, mostly along the peninsula and the Aleutian Range. And this low now back right over the southern Kenai Peninsula, and a little bit higher pressure, definitely colder temperatures building into the northwest interior, and may start picking up a little bit more in the way of moisture, rain, and snow showers. There's just snow showers here for south central Alaska. Still looks like basically rain showers, periods of, and nothing real heavy, mostly for the North Gulf Coast. And again, a lot of the moisture staying near the coastline with not much getting to the north, but there will be a general increase here over the eastern interior, Copper River Basin, on up across the 40-mile country to about Eagle, and a couple more impulses of showers to move into the southeast coast there with that southwesterly flow. The main trough back here, it's going to keep it kind of in a wet pattern there for the southeast coast through the weekend, but higher pressure out here building eastward ahead of a pretty strong frontal system that will be crossing the Komodorskis Sunday evening and night, and then driving right into the Bering Sea. Should be into the central Bering Sea during the early part of next week, Monday night, Tuesday, something like that. And so that'll push this ridge right into the interior. For the temperatures today, range from 10 degrees at Talkeetna to 24 Anchorage, 30 degrees in Kenai, 10 degrees warmer there at Homer with 40. Same thing at Cordova, Seward at 41. And southeast temperatures range from the upper 30s to the mid 40s, with 43 at Kodiak. Up to the north, Gulkana just 1 degree above zero, 13 over at Delta, where they had the wind, but less wind, and 7 below zero in Fairbanks. Same thing in Tanana, with up to the north, Bettle saw 1 degree, minus 20 at Arctic Village, and 11 below over Kaktovik, with minus 8 at Barrow. Same thing at Point Lay. There's a minus 1 at Kivalina, while Kotzebue had 2 degrees above zero. I believe that's Buckland with minus 3. Anatuvik 0, 13 at Tin City. Again, gusty north winds there up to about 35-40 miles an hour. And Gamble, windy as well, but not quite as windy. Temperature 25 degrees. Nome had 20. And mid and lower Yukon Kuskokwim Valley areas here, single numbers and a little bit milder, but not much out to the southwest there. But Macoriac did push up to 23. And for the Bristol Bay area, mid-20s to mid to upper 30s for the Pribilofs. And out to the west here, 40s, upper 30s and 40s, but north winds, colder air coming southward here gusts up to 45 miles an hour at Shimia with snow showers, temperatures at 33 degrees. And for the lows tonight, below zero here north of the Alaska Range, and coldest north of the Brooks Range and back here over the eastern interior, 20 below possibly, but pretty chilly out to the southwest coast, but above zero, and upper teens to upper 20s for the Bristol Bay area, 30s out over the Aleutians and the Bering Sea, mildest over the Panhandle. And for the highs tomorrow, mostly below zero, again up along the Arctic coast, and a little bit colder than that over the North Slope areas, with readings running from about -2 at Fort Yukon to 20s to mid-30s here south of the Alaska Range, and everywhere else somewhere in between. Back into the upper 30s there for the Aleutians and the Pribilofs, with lower 40s over the Alaska Peninsula. A little chillier up over northeast Bristol Bay. Kodiak, though, should push up to 44 degrees. Flying weather with those storms coming up to the northeast and then pulling back to the west. Look for IFR at times along the southeast coast here, all the way up to possibly Yakutat. You'll be on the northern edge, Cordova, over to Montague Island. And again, some of this might push into western Prince William Sound tomorrow afternoon and slide into Passage Canal. Periods of marginal VFR for Kodiak Island, the Alaska Peninsula, and out over the Bering Sea, with marginal VFR in the forecast for a good stretch of the Arctic coast up there, with possible IFR on the eastern areas. For Anaktuvuk, good VFR, either Approach and Adigan, same forecast as well. Lake Clark and Merrill, VFR, both east and west and through the pass. And rainy should be VFR as well. I don't think it'll get marginal conditions at all there tomorrow. And for windy VFR, Isabel VFR, and Mentasta, all VFR, as well as Tanita. And for Portage, VFR, but again, it could become marginal, maybe even IFR, depending on how much moisture should slide up into the area. Chilkoot and White, marginal VFR. Freezing levels, 2,000 feet here, with that flow from the southeast to the northwest or west-northwest. A little bit milder here over the southeast coast. And at the surface there into Canada, and then along the coast, and then back up into the north-central Bering Sea. Icing threats, again, where the main area of moisture is, and that's with those frontal systems. Could be moderate rime icing here over southern southeast coast and mostly along and into the Gulf of Alaska, and then that westerly flow could push that into the southern Kenai Peninsula, and then that all takes a turn to the southwest there across Kodiak Island, but dissipates, as well as the Alaska Peninsula. Hit and miss stuff, possibilities of out over the southern Bering Sea and in across the Aleutians. Upper wind flow chart showing ridging here aloft over the northeast interior, and that keeping the Arctic jet up to the north, while this trough over the Alaska Peninsula, that keeps the Pacific jet down to the south. And although a pretty good system building out here over the Chukchi Sea, and that's going to be driving eastward, as I mentioned, late in the weekend and into the first of next week. Meanwhile, 9,000-foot winds, 35 knots here along the frontal boundary there from the eastern Gulf Coast down along the Panhandle, supporting those gale force winds in the forecast, and northeasterlies 25 to 35 knots, Bering Sea, only 10 to 20 here over the central and southern interior, about 22, 30 knots there for the Arctic coast, with the strongest winds right up in this area, and then those pick up to about 50 knots when they get down to the Aleutians. For 3,000 feet northeast, same flow, a little bit varied, more variable, tends to take a little more northerly direction at this elevation through the Bering Strait and the St. Lawrence Island area, but still quite strong through the central Bering Sea and out toward the west central Aleutians up to 50 knots. And also along this front and the low pressure area, 35 knot winds, much lighter as you go east and north, really just 10 to 15 here across the Copper River Basin. Then a band of 20 knot winds through the northeast interior. And as for turbulence, occasional moderate chop below 6,000 feet, about Cordova or Cape Yakataga on down the coastline there, mostly western areas of the southeast coast, and moderate chop also up over the eastern Arctic coast, mostly north of the coastline there, and the west side, Point Lake, Cape Lisburne, Point Hope, those areas, maybe Kivalina as well, and then through the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island, right down along the southwest coast. Just some hit and miss stuff up over the interior. Not a bad day, pretty smooth. Kodiak Island, the Alaska Peninsula, on out to about Atka, and then things get a little bumpier as you head towards Shemya. And after the break, I'll return with a look at the marine forecasts.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Mary O'Connor with the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation. I also manage the Aviation Safety Program at the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health here in Anchorage. Working in safety, I'm always glad to see someone who helps people prepare for what might be their worst day. This evening, we are excited to have an expert in safety training. Clint Homestead is an instructor at Learn to Return Training Systems. Welcome to Hangar Flying, Clint.
Thank you for having me.
Learn to Return has a lot of really interesting sounding courses, from bear guarding training to tower climbing and wilderness medicine. But we're going to be talking about your aviation-based training tonight. Clint, can you tell us about the basic training that is available for pilots and passengers to help prepare them for a crash on land?
Well, the primary course that we have for that is labeled Aviation Land Crash Survival. And it's a one-day course, and our bullet points that we want to get across to people and talk about is what you have in regards to accidents, the impacts, egress, and then we talk lastly all is survival on land. And how we do that is we actually, the first part of the day is we go into our accidents, whether they're pilot error or if they're mechanical error, which can vary hugely. Also, in addition to that, during the morning, we actually invert students inside our rolling inverted escape trainer. It's an aluminum trainer that is designed to help students understand what it feels like to be, one, inverted upside down in a 4-point restraint harness, and two, see if they can unweight their seatbelt and try and lower themselves to the roof of the aircraft, which is now the floor. Also, the lastly of all we use this for is to show people how to track out and find door mechanisms, outside references of an airframe, in addition to that, ejecting their seatbelt and getting out of the aircraft.
Wow, and do they do that inside or outside?
This is just the morning session, and this is all inside classroom before they've gone to the field at all. Well, after lunch, we take them to the field, and what we do is we train them in the post-crash scenario, and that's categorized using the his/her principle. One is H for hazard, trying to get away from the airframe to the nose of the aircraft where there isn't a lot of bad things that hurt you in the back. Also, we have injuries that we get upon impact, so we have to work on treating those injuries while we're out in the field. Students will apply splints, they will stop bleeders out in the woods in the field setting. In addition to that, we teach them how to build personal shelters, improvised clothing. We teach them how to make improvised footwear out of pieces of the airframe that are warmer than a sub-zero temperature boot made in the construction time zone. And also what we do is we also move from there into teaching them what to eat, what different types of foods, and also we move into starting fires from scratch, all primitive fire building, and then lastly of all, rescue and getting back home to your family.
Wow, that's pretty comprehensive. Can you tell me, in your opinion, what would be the most important thing that people could do to increase their odds of surviving a plane crash?
I would believe training and repetition. Training and repetition, what training does, it gives you the awareness of the area you're going into and the type of travel and the safety precautions to take along the way. And then repetition is that muscle memory. For example, when you get into a rental car, the first 5 minutes is trying to figure out where that window opener is, how to get out of the car. You go to hit the blinker and instead your windshield wiper comes on. After a while though, it becomes second nature. That's the muscle memory portion that we teach at our school. So then people can get out of airframes in high stress scenarios, and where we want them to be is we want them to get out of the airframe, whatever, it was a rotor wing or fixed wing, and they don't even know what happened. It just happens like that.
So they're doing it from muscle memory more than recognition and thinking about it.
The first step is recognizing that it's actually happening and then acting based upon that recognition. Once you recognize that something's happening, then you can move directly into your muscle memory and utilizing your training that you've done over and over again.
Okay. And do you find that a certain type of person does better?
The tough person does better. The lucky person does better. The person that's dressed better for the environment that they might end up in. And also the people that are more motivated to get home alive. For me, it's my 3.5-year-old daughter that would motivate me the most to get home alive.
That's great. That's some really good advice right there. Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is some really good information, Clint. Thank you for being here with us. Ladies and gentlemen, please tune in to our next show when we learn about training for underwater aircraft egress. On behalf of Alaska Public Media, thanks for tuning in to Hangar Flying. Clint gave us some great information. Winter flying in Alaska has some special challenges that we need to take into consideration to stay safe. Until next time, fly safely and train for the best circumstances, but be prepared for the worst.
Welcome back. Well, gale force winds tomorrow from the east or east-southeast along all of the coastline, maybe a little lighter up here along the North Gulf Coast. And the northerlies up to 30 knots, varying directions all the way down. And southeasterly gales, especially going into Clarence Strait down in this area here for these southern inside waters. And then for Sunday, main systems go through, so we're looking at more of a southwesterly flow coming in. One disturbance may develop here, so I kept 25-knot winds along the south coast, but those should be coming down to something less than that in the afternoon, if they reach that at all. Otherwise, over the inside waters, mostly south, 15 to 20 knots, maybe some higher gusts early on. And for the Prince William Sound zone, northeasterlies 20 tomorrow with northeast winds picking up the small craft advisories, east-northeast winds here for the North Gulf Coast into the Barren Islands, 20 knots there. For the marine areas on the east side of Kodiak Island, Shelikof Strait, small craft advisories should stay under gale though, and small craft advisories extend back up into southern Cook Inlet and down to 15 knots for the north end. Those become light and variable possibly on Sunday with 10-knot winds across just about all of Cook Inlet, trending toward northwest, but only 15 knots here for the Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay. Shelikof Strait west or west-northwest up to 10 in the afternoon, but quite light here, and generally from a northerly direction, the east side of Kodiak Island, and easterlies at about 20 knots here for the eastern Gulf Coast, and southeast maybe for Prince William Sound, but only at 15 knots. And for the Bristol Bay zones, northeasterlies, small craft advisories, 25 knots there from Bristol Bay, all the way down to Cape Sarachef, and then on the Pacific side, a lot lighter and more variable here, just 10 knots, and northeast 15 from Sitkinak to Chignak. Sunday's outlook, more northerly here, northwest, south of the range, Aleutian Range and Peninsula, but about 20 knots. Could see some higher gusts here out of the bays on the south side, 15 to 20 knots for the area southwest of Sitkinak. Out in the Aleutians, gales, northwesterlies here for the western areas in toward Adak and Atka, dropping back to about 30 knots with 20 to 30 knot winds across the Fox Islands, mostly a 20 to 25 knot northerly wind there for the Unalaska region. And then for Sunday, we've got a ridge coming in from the west, so the winds will be light coming down under gale force late Saturday afternoon and Saturday night here for the western Aleutians, but during the afternoon on Sunday, that next strong front should bring them back up to gale force with northwesterlies turning more northerly and holding at about 25 knots with higher gusts over the eastern Aleutians. And for the west coast, for the southwest coast, northerlies, 25 knots with freezing spray that becomes heavy freezing spray over the northern Bering, especially later tomorrow. and on up into St. Lawrence Island. And then on Sunday, an even colder air mass coming southward, so freezing spray and heavy freezing spray may reach the Pribilof Islands, the freezing spray end of it as well. But small craft advisories remain out for just about all areas, but trending down for St. Lawrence Island. In fact, St. Matthew Island here from right about the island to the west will probably drop off to about 15 knots Sunday afternoon. And for the Arctic coast, a little brisk on the east side here with brisk wind advisories out, 25 knots, and then dropping back to 20 knots to the central, taking a turn with northeast winds here, picking back up to 30 knots, Cape Lisburne and Point Hope, and then northerlies at about 30 with gale force northerlies blowing through the Bering Strait to St. Lawrence Island. And then on Sunday, everything kind of trends more or backs to the northwest here for the Kotzebue Sound region out into the Chukchi Sea, a little more northerly up around the Capes and bending back or varying back to the north as you get up along the west side of the coast. Northeasterlies here for the central and eastern Arctic coast, only 15 knots, but may hold on to those brisk wind advisories here in the eastern zone around Kaktovik. And for tonight, not too bad here over the interior, staying pretty breezy over the eastern Alaska Range through the passes, probably down into the southeast interior as well, with gale warnings out along the coast here. Get to the other side of this with rain heavy at times over the Panhandle as this system pulls up to the north and eventually begin to pull back to the west. And so this front for tomorrow really isn't going to move too much as that happens. And then all that moisture funneling back westward there into Kodiak Island, just kind of grazing the coastline here to a little more extent over
These
the Kenai
forecasts
Peninsula.
are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
It's never too early to set expectations and goals for your child's education. The UA College Savings Plan provides opportunities that can help you reach your educational savings goals. Save in Alaska. Study anywhere. There is more information available by calling 1-888, the number 4, and then Alaska. This message sponsored by the UA College Savings Plan.